is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another edition of the Magic the Gathering Market Watch. Now, we're a week into the new standard since Kaladesh has been released. There's been a huge rotation, and there's a lot of changes out there, and you can definitely see the impact, especially right now in the standard market. Last week at the Star City Games Open, we saw a lot of cards play a big role from Kaladesh, and you're going to notice, obviously, those cards now are going to be going up in value as players are starting to try to put together their own decks based on what they saw. Also, things will continue to change, so keep a close eye on the market over the next few days, because this weekend there's another Star City Games Open, and we're moving closer and closer to the Pro Tour, which will have a huge impact on cards due to the fact that the Pro Tour will, of course, get even more attention than these Opens are getting the first couple weekends. Having said that, Modern and Legacy are a little bit slower this week. We'll take a look at those as well, though, so let's jump in quickly before we get started, though. If you check out the description below, you'll see a link to our Amazon affiliate store, and if you make any purchases through any of those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. All the cards you're going to see here today are available on the Amazon affiliate store. So thank you to everyone who's made purchases already. Thank you for looking at that, and as always, thanks to the patrons on Patreon as well for supporting the channel. Having said that, let's get into the cards. We're going to start off, of course, as we always do, with standard, with the top 5 cards that lost value this week. Now, what you're going to see here mostly are cards that had a kind of high price tag during the pre-release season, and now that the first week of standards happened and they haven't made a huge splash, they're starting to stabilize a little bit. Coming in number 5 is Chandra, Pyro Genius, down 95 cents to $5.90. Now, this Chandra, as well as her Nissa counterpart from the Planeswalker decks, really should be going down in value quite a bit at this point. Not only can you pick those decks up at game stores, but also big box stores, so that's going to be a really big impact on the value of these cards long term. There's just a lot of copies out there. Also, they've purposely been developed to not be super competitive for standard. Not to say that they're unplayable. I have seen people try to brew with them, and I wouldn't be shocked if you see a copy out of a sideboard here and there at some point, but you're not going to see probably extensive standard play with them, and that's important to keep in mind for investment reasons. I do think they're fun cards, but I don't think there's a lot of long-term investment value here. Coming in at number 4 is Saheeli Rai, down $1.74 to $10.79. Now, keep an eye on this card. She didn't make any sort of splash the first week of standard or anything like this, but there is a lot of stuff going on this card for 3 mana, and if there's an Izzet deck that's using some compatible artifacts at some point in standard, she could see some play, although I do think she's more of maybe a legacy card or something like that, or maybe even a vintage card, just because of her abilities and their interactions with artifacts. This is an interesting one to keep an eye on, and if you can pick up copies of her for under $10, might not be a bad gamble, or at least speculation that at some point she could see some play somewhere. Coming in number 3 is Dovin Bond, down $1.77 to $9.99. I think as the standard game develops a little bit and you get past the first few weeks of standard, you might see some more control decks, and at that point Dovin may have a chance to shine a little bit. Again, not a bad pickup for under $10. If you can find these for cheap, then I'd probably grab them. You might be able to use them at some point during the standard season. Coming in number 3 is Nissa Vital Force, down $1.90 to $16.83. Now, she's doing slightly better than the previous Planeswalkers we've seen, but she is a 5 casting cost Planeswalker, which is a little more of a commitment. So in some ways, she's more of a gamble, but the payoff is also better as well, as her abilities are going to be more powerful. So I do think she will continue to see a little bit of standard play here and there, but I do think her price is probably still going to drop too. Finally, coming in number 1, Chandra, Torch of Defiance, down $5.69 to $33.99. Now, this is, of course, the big story of the week. This card, pre-release prices were going for anywhere between $60 and $80. This card was really hyped up to be one of the biggest cards to come out since Jace the Mind Sculptor, some folks said even. Now, having said that, here's the thing you want to remember about this card. This is still a very, very good card. It's a very powerful card. It does a lot. It only costs 4 mana. Now, it is 2 red and 2. So, a couple things you want to keep in mind here when you compare this card to other cards in the past. Some folks compared it to Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Well, probably not a real fair comparison, because Jace Vryn's Prodigy was 1 blue and 1. It was only 2 casting costs, and it could be splashed into virtually any deck at that time in standard, and pretty much any deck during that time wanted to play it in standard. Now, Chandra is going to be shoehorned a little more into red decks because of the double red casting cost. So she's not going to have that same universal appeal. Now, the second thing you want to remember is first week of Standard, she didn't see a whole lot of action. A little bit out of sideboards here and there, but it really was a week of Smuggler's Copter, which we're going to talk about more in a little bit. And that really overshadowed everything. The second thing going against Chandra at this point is she's in Kaladesh, which from a collector's or investment point of view, these are going to be some of the lower value Magic cards that we've probably seen in quite some time for a couple reasons. One reason is inventions. I mean, look at what Expeditions did to Battle for Zendikar, and you'll have a pretty good idea of what you can expect from Kaladesh. They do encourage people to open more packs and buy more packs, which means more packs get printed and more cards get opened, and there's more cards sitting on shelves in stores. As a matter of fact, I went to 2 stores this week and saw plenty of copies of Chandra sitting on shelves being sold for around $30. And these are brick and mortar stores, not just online stores. So there's a lot of copies of her out there. Also, Kaladesh is the set, since it's the fall set, it's going to be the set that goes the longest before the next set. The next set won't come out till January, so this is going to be drafted full Kaladesh between now and January, as well as sealed events with full Kaladesh. That means so much product is going to be open for limited players as well, that mythic rares even, but especially rares, are going to have a really hard time holding their value. So I do think Chandra is going to continue to go down. However, I do think Chandra is going to see a much more play than she saw the first week. I think what's going to happen with the metagame as players wrap their head around how to deal with Smuggler's Copter and how to diversify their decks a little bit, Smuggler's Copter will start to go down in value a little bit, and Chandra will have a chance, as well as many other cards, to step in and shine. She's a great card. She's going to see play, and she hasn't even had a chance to break into, say, like Modern or even Legacy or anything like that yet. So don't count her out. It's not like she's just going to plummet to nothing. However, take advantage of this, especially over the next few weeks. If she doesn't see play in the next couple big tournaments, she's going to continue to fall and fall and fall. So watch the market closely. When you can get a deal on her, definitely jump in and get that deal, because at some point things are going to change and she's definitely going to make it to see play. All right, let's move into the top 5 standard cards that have gained value this week. Coming in at number 5 is Ether Hub, up $1.23 to $3.15. And this card, like really all the cards we're going to see today, are cards that continue to see some play in the new standard, and a lot of folks are kind of scrambling to pick up at this point to put their decks together. Now, what I like about this card in particular is it feels a lot like a Pain Land to me, except a Pain Land that can give you any of the 5 colors. I mean, Pain Lands basically let you either tap for colorless or use a resource. This is doing the same thing. Now, granted, life is a more abundant resource than energy in some cases, but really, you can use Pain Lands, right? I mean, how often do you really ping yourself with them? Once or twice, maybe at the beginning of the game to build up your mana base. This really gives you probably enough of the resource to get by in the early game, and then later in the game you don't even necessarily have to use the resource. This is going to be a great card. Now granted, it's an uncommon, so probably not a great long-term investment or anything, but still a really good and useful card. Coming in number 4 is Inspiring Vantage, up $1.72 to $6.45. So this is the first of the fast lands that we're seeing make the top 5. And this one, of course, is the Boros colors, and Boros just really proved to be a driving force in the new standard last weekend. I think we saw 5 decks in the top 8 that were Boros decks. Now, having said that, all the fast lands are great. Pick them all up if you haven't already. This one is probably going to cost you the most, but it's still very reasonable. It's $6-7. I would just go ahead and bite the bullet and get these now, and you can get the other 4 much cheaper already. Coming in number 3, Gideon Ally of Zendikar, up $1.81 to $19.38. Now, a couple of things about Gideon. Everyone kind of tries to count Gideon out every time a new set comes out. It's like, okay, well, Gideon had his day, and he'll be played a lot less now. But every time, he still sees tons of play. People still find a role for him. Now, a couple things of interest with this card. First off, yes, Gideon is still seeing standard play, even after Kaladesh came out. But Gideon is also seeing a lot of modern play now. Junk decks are running this, as well as some Eldrazi builds, and he's even made it into Legacy and some Death and Taxes builds. So, Death and Taxes, Legacy, Eldrazi, Junk, like, all of a sudden, just kind of out of nowhere, there's been a lot of decks wanting to play Gideon in a lot of different formats. This card, I think, is the real deal. I think he's going to be hanging out for a long time, and a Battle for Zendikar card that's climbing to around the $20 range is actually a pretty big deal. If this was from a set even a few years ago, this would have been a $30, $40 card at this point, but Battle for Zendikar just was really highly printed. You do have to keep that into account. But I think long term, getting him might still be a good deal. Now, keep in mind, eventually when he does rotate out in a little while, he will probably take a little bit of a price cut, and maybe that's when you pick him up. But if you want him between now and then and you plan on using him for competitive play, you probably have to bite the bullet and spend about 15-20 bucks on him. All right, coming in at number 2 is Sky Sovereign Console Flagship, up 255 to 653. This was kind of a top-end finisher of the Boros Vehicles deck that we saw this weekend, and boy, did it do some work on camera. And because of that, of course, this is going up in price pretty significantly. This card's fantastic. It's going to continue to see standard play for quite some time, I have no doubt. I almost think that Aether Revolt may have some ways to hose vehicles, or at least some more ways to hose vehicles, because the vehicles feel really pushed in Kaladesh. And at least for the next few months, this is going to be a major one. Coming at number 1, probably no surprise to anyone out there, Smuggler's Copter, up $6.42 to $17.38. This card was insane last weekend, okay? First off, top 8, I think every deck had 4 copies. I think in the top 16, every deck had 4 copies. Then I think when you get to like the top 32, I think 30 out of 32 decks were running this card. Like, this is almost unheard of numbers. I compared this card in the past to Umezawa's Jitte as far as the way it works as a support card and its power level for its given time. Granted, it's not as broken as Jitte by any means, and there's a lot of ways you can deal with this card. But at the same time, it's just incredible value for 2 mana. It does feel like Wizards maybe pushed this one a little too hard, much in the way that some of the early equipment got pushed a little too hard until they kind of figured that out. This one is the real deal. It's going to see play for ever at this point. Modern, Legacy, probably Vintage, you name it, it's going to show up. But as far as Standard goes, do keep in mind as the weeks evolve that players are going to learn how to play around this card a little better. And I'm not even talking sideboards. I mean, it's worth main decking against this card. It's that prevalent. It's that important. So I do think that this card will see a little bit of a drop off. Combine that with the fact that it is a Kaladesh rare, and there's going to be a lot of copies of this out there. So be real careful about this as far as a long-term investment. This card over time will start to decrease in value as more and more packs get open. However, a lot of people don't have the luxury of waiting. If they're trying to put together a deck or they're going to a GP or something, you may have to bite the bullet and spend the extra money on this card now. If you can wait, I would wait, because again, once you get into the winter and there's a lot of packs open, this is a rare, you're going to be able to find copies once the scramble's over and everybody gets their 4 copies for their standard season. But right now, you're going to see a pretty strong spike with this card, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. Alright, let's move on to Modern. Now, compared to Standard, Modern's a little slower this week, but there's a couple interesting things. So let's look at the cards that lost value. Coming in number 5 is Modern Masters 2015 Tarmogoyf, down $1.27 to $133.08. Kind of interesting to me that the 2 Modern Masters Tarmogoyfs are now very close in price. They're about $133 approximately each now. Future Sight still a little bit higher, but all 3 of them are dropping. I do think the market is soft right now for this card. Not only is it seeing a little bit less play than it has in the past, but the players that play with this card have their copies, and with Modern Masters 2017 really just around the corner in March, I think a lot of folks are speculating that this will be reprinted again. Coming in number 4 is Horizon Canopy, down $1.35 to $74.99. Another card that has a strong possibility of showing up in Modern Masters 2017. So you're going to start seeing some of these more expensive cards get a little softer, where the market's going to kind of have a wait and see mentality to whether they're going to pick up copies or wait to see if it gets reprinted. Coming in number 3 is Intervention Pack, down $1.50 to $6.64. Now, this card spiked a week ago or so due to the fact that Madcap Experiment was coming out in Kaladesh. Now, it's a little too early to say if Madcap Experiment decks are going to pan out. If they do, this card potentially could continue to go up. If they don't, it could go back down. What we're seeing this week really is just stabilization based off the fact that it spiked pretty hard last week, but the jury's still out on this one. It's just going to depend on how that deck does. I would be interested if anyone has already tried it out. If you'd let me know in the comments below, I'd be very curious to see how it's been going and if it will cross over into a major force in Modern or not. Coming in at number 2 is Noble Hierarch. This is the Conflux version, down 445 to 66.50. Now, this spiked really hard a few weeks ago. It went up to about $75 or so, and that was a really high spike. Now, granted, the card is played all over the place, but this felt like a little bit of market manipulation. Now, after this card spiked, the Modern Masters 2015 version started to follow it and go up a little bit as well. But now this is starting to come down to probably its normal level. I really see this more as a $60 card than a $75 card. Again, this is a card that potentially could be reprinted and hopefully will be reprinted in Modern Masters 2017. And coming in at number 1 is Brushland. This time we're looking at the 5th edition version in particular, but they all are dropping at this point. This one's down $6.91 to $11.59. That was the biggest drop of all of them this week. But having said that, Brushlands, I've been saying this for months now, don't overpay for these things. Yes, it is a major part of a major Modern deck with Bant Eldrazi, but at the same time, there's definitely been some market manipulation behind this card too. So if you need to pick them up, there's some cheaper versions out there, but maybe give it another week or two, they'll continue to come down. All right, let's look at the top 5 cards that have gained value this week. Coming in number 5 is Engineered Explosives. This is the 5th Dawn version, up 69 cents to 53.15. So not a huge increase here. This continues to be a strong card that's held stable. I thought this would dip a little more after its huge spike, but it is a card that's seeing tons of play out of sideboards. Coming in number 4 is Karn Liberated, and this is the Modern Masters 2015 version, up 96 cents to 43.02. Nothing new to report here either with Karn. Continues to see play in the Tron decks. Coming in number 3, Ether Vial from Darksteel, up 99 cents to 41.70. Again, not a huge increase or anything here, just another Modern staple that's hanging around. Coming in number 2 is Platinum Imperium, up $1.61 to $24.25. Now, this is another card that kind of goes along with the Madcap Experiment speculation. And this one, if that deck pans out, could be a big force because it is a mythic rare from Scars of Meriden. So it's a little bit older, probably a little bit harder to find, which could mean that if the deck does well, this could be a card to watch. If the deck doesn't do well, this one will drop. Now, this does still see a little bit of play here and there in like Storm decks and stuff, but it's kind of fringe at this point. Without Madcap Experiment panning out, it's probably not going to be a huge card. So this one we'll have to kind of wait and see. Finally, coming in number 1 is Cavern of Souls, up $1.88 to $64.90. This card desperately needs a reprint. Hopefully it will show up in Modern Masters 2017, although some folks have speculated that it might instead appear in a Eternal Masters product in the future just due to the fact that it sees so much Eternal play. But really, regardless, hopefully we'll see it sooner than later. This card is a staple in so many places. All right, let's move on to Legacy. Now, Legacy this week, again, it's a little bit slower. You're going to see a lot of reserve cards on the list and a lot of price stabilization for the most part. So let's look at the cards that lost value this week. Coming in number 5 is Plateau Unlimited, down $5.32 to $154.52. Number 4 is The Abyss, down $7.25 to $268.37. Coming in number 4 is Unlimited Navineral's Disc, down $7.73 to $52.96. You know, in the world of Unlimited, there's a lot of cards like this. Winter Orb, Armageddon come to mind that just drastically kind of go back and forth. This is just another one of those cards. Be careful with this one. You don't want to overpay for it. And if you just want a copy, obviously this has been reprinted many times, most recently in Eternal Masters. You can get them real cheap. Coming in number 2 is Unlimited Underground Sea, down $40.91 to $541.65. And finally, number 1 this week, the Tabernacle of Pendrell Vale, down $87.62 to $1,225. That's about the right price for this card. I think this is about a $1,200 card. It's hard to tell sometimes with the drastic stabilization that you see because the card is so expensive, but I think, quote-unquote, a fair price for this card is about $1,200. All right, let's look at the top 5 Legacy cards that have gained a value this week. Coming in number 5 is Diamond Valley, up $12.34 to $218.86. This does feel like a buyout to me. This card's gone up quite a bit in the last few weeks, and it's not a card that sees extensive play. It's just a reserve list card that's very rare from Arabian Nights. Coming in number 4 is Mirror Universe, up $12.77 to $111.75. Interesting to note that this card has yet again broken the $100 mark. This could be potentially the beginning of a buyout. Again, it's a card that isn't necessarily heavily played, but it is a fan favorite card. Coming in number 3 is Drop of Honey, of $15 to $94.99. This one's kind of interesting because this was obviously the target of the buyout. It spiked really, really hard, and then it dropped really hard as they got reintroduced into the market. Now, I kind of feel like maybe this spike is one of two things. Either it is a secondary buyout that someone is going back and trying to buy out these again, or it could just be the fact that players saw this spike due to the buyout, and once it came back down in price, some people jumped on thinking, you know what, I'm just going to play it safe and pick up my copies for my collection at this point. So it could be either or. We'll have to keep an eye on this one next couple weeks. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon, though. Speaking of buyouts, All Hallows Eve, up $30.28 to $109.98. I do think this is spiking due to a buyout, or at least a mini buyout. This is a card that just is a great target for something like that for a couple of reasons. First off, you have Christopher Rush art, which looks amazing on the card. Secondly, real-world references stopped very early on in Magic's history, so there are some collectors that are drawn to those type of cards, and this is a great example of that, All Hallows Eve being a real-world reference. Great collector's card, even if it doesn't see a whole lot of extensive play. I think this is a card that a lot of folks want for their collection. And finally, coming in number 1 is the Arabian Nights City of Brass, up $30.41 to $140.78. Now, much like Drop of Honey, this kind of did the same thing. It felt like someone was buying these up, and then all of a sudden they got reintroduced to the market. They went up, they went down, and now they're going up a little bit again. So I think maybe this is another case where the buyout, even though it didn't last long term, may have brought some attention to the card, and now some folks are just picking these up. Again, this is not a reserve list card. I think that's interesting to know, and of course has been reprinted many times. And if you want a copy of this, you can still get a very cheap copy with great art. For example, like the Modern Masters version looked beautiful, had amazing art, and of course it's much cheaper than this one. Alright, so that is the market watch for this week. Really excited to see the changes over the next few weeks. Of course, we have another Star City Games Open this weekend. That's going to influence the market, as well as the Pro Tour coming up, which will have a huge impact. So continue to keep a close eye on the market, especially if you're trying to pick up cards or sell cards. And as always, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.